YouTube, how's it going? Welcome back to AJ's Garage. This is actually part 2 of the instrument cluster repair. I did a previous video about a year ago where we switched out the speedometer because the one I had in my truck had the speedo cable broken off in it, so I wasn't able to reconnect it and see how fast that was going. I also replaced this lens, the temperature gauge I believe, and cleaned up the back housing of it. So finally I ordered the circuit board that I needed to make the gauges work. The one on mine, this left end here was all falling apart, so it wasn't making a solid connection. The lights would turn on occasionally, most of the time they wouldn't. And most importantly, now that I have the auxiliary tank in the truck, you can see how much gas is in there. So I have the sending unit, so the ground, the yellow cable here goes to this orange wire, which I looked up in a diagram online, and then this plugs into something up by the firewall, and it should read how much gas is in there. So let's get started. Moment of truth. So I got the gauge cluster plugged back in. I just wired up the auxiliary tank real quick back to where it was connected at the front of the truck. Also grounded it out as well. So let's see if we get a fuel reading. And nothing. Well, that sucks. Let's see if nothing. Actually, well, there's something. Oh, we got turn signals. Didn't have those before. Looks like the right is working also. Can't really tell from here, but the light is out, so might just need to replace the bulb. But nothing as far as the fuel. Actually, looks like we're missing a connection here, so let me take a look and see what we can find back there, and hopefully that's just a quick fix. Looking behind the instrument cluster, I didn't really find anything too out of place. When my dad originally got the truck running, he had the mechanic just kind of wire a temperature gauge and oil pressure, so he just spliced into the wiring. But what I think the main issue is that orange wire right there, this little plug here. Like I had mentioned earlier before, and you guys saw in the video, the wire that runs from the tank through the frame is orange as well. Besides this missing the fuse to select the tank, I believe this plug connects to whatever goes here and allows the camper specialist to select between the main tank, which is behind the seat, and the auxiliary tank. So looks like we're gonna have to go parts hunting or see if I can find that somewhere soon. Alrighty guys, so we're about 2 days removed from working on the gauges in the truck. Where I left you guys off last, I realized that I'm missing some of the wiring for the tank selector. And looking at this truck here, it's missing the selector, but it looks like this is the wiring that I need. I had seen this right now on another truck, but it was all spliced up and on the ground, so I wasn't sure if it was the correct one, but This green wire looks like it's coming from the standard tank, and then this orange wire here, which is hooked up to, if I can get this out of the way, sorry, to that one, which I'm missing this one. So that should be what I need. This yellow would probably be going up to the gauges. So let's get this popped off, see if I can find another one and maybe a little better condition, but for now we're gonna go with this one. Alrighty, so I'm all finished up at the junkyard. Of course, main thing I went for was this piece of the wiring harness that I was missing. This sends the fuel reading to the gauge depending on which tank you have selected. I also picked up the valve that lets you select which tank you're actually running. In this current setting, it's to the auxiliary tank. Of course, I don't have the standard tank in the truck, so I'm just gonna block that off. Sorry about the plane. And last thing was this radio block off plate. So if your truck didn't have a radio, that way it wouldn't just have a big hole in the dash. This was the block off. Probably put this in at a later time. Alrighty, so I got the harness plugged back in, got all the hookups connected except for that middle one with the yellow on it. I ended up having to go back to the junkyard and actually cut this little connector off of the truck that it was on. Spliced it onto that little end that was on mine that someone for some reason had cut off, and then we'll disconnect this back up. But this one goes to the auxiliary tank, this green one goes to the standard tank, and this I believe goes to the gauges. So hopefully everything will work and we'll be able to see how much gas is in the truck. Alrighty guys, so before I fire up the truck and see if the fuel gauge gives us a reading, I just want to go over two small things that I did. I'll insert a picture, but before, for some reason, they had, whoever did it, just put in some strange looking dome light. You can see where the original paint color shone through, and then the light that was on there, so I'll insert a picture of that. And also, you guys saw that I picked up the tank selector, so I got that put in. I'll insert a picture of what that looks like underneath. Let's see if this is working now. So if you guys can tell, it's moving over really slow, but it's moving over. So I'm gonna take the truck out for a drive and see how far that goes up, put some gas in. I just put some gas in the truck. On the way to the station here, it barely went up to about 1/8 of a tank, maybe a little bit more. So let's see how this jumps up. Moving a little faster now. I think I put about $30. In California, gas is pretty expensive right now. It's about $4.19 a gallon, which is ridiculous. But the gauge is moving up. Again, it's a 22.5 gallon tank, 23 gallons. So it looks like we're just gonna stay at a bit under half a tank. I'll catch it back up with you guys at the house. Alrighty guys, so we're back from the gas station. The gas gauge read about half a tank on the way home. So again, pumped that that's working. One thing I did notice is that the turn signals weren't always working, depending on which setting you had on the lights, as far as headlights or running lights being on. So I popped the lens off. I always thought that my reverse lights didn't work, but it turns out there wasn't even a bulb in there. So hopefully getting one in there fixes that issue, but I'm just gonna pull these completely out and disconnect this back half of the wiring harness to the lights. We're also gonna remove that 4-pin connector there and see if that fixes the issue. First order of business, now that I got this rear wiring harness section out, is removing that 4-pin connector. So it looks like it was spliced in here, and then this big old mess right there. This wiring here goes to the driver's side taillight, and then this section over here goes to the passenger side. So all this wiring is blue, so it leads me to believe maybe the wiring was bad. Whatever might have happened, they spliced into it here. So I think this is what could be giving us some sort of ground or connection issue. So let's get this cleaned up. So I got the harness all cleaned up. I was able to remove the 4-pin connector pretty easily, and then I also cleaned up the passenger side connections, which, like I mentioned, was this blue cord that had been replaced for whatever reason at one point. The only thing I'm not sure about is what this connector is for. It was kind of just taped up like this and hidden. Now there's also a connector coming from the frame rail that looks similar to this, but I'm not quite sure what it would go to. I am missing the lights for the license plate, so I'm looking to add those here pretty soon, so could possibly be that connection, but let's get this back in the truck.